Afternoon, everyone. Am I live? Am I going? Good. I'm Jeff Fletcher. I work also in the innovation team. I work in Brian's team. If Brian is the head of innovation, I'm probably the right leg. Today, I have to start with a confession. On the 1st of February 2016, I broke up with Google. We'd had a good run. We'd looked at pictures of cats. We'd watched videos of people falling down and laughed and laughed. We found solutions to coding problems, but it had become a bit stalkerish. We'd gotten to the point where I was feeling that Google was just following me around a bit too much. Kind of everywhere I went, there was Google, watching me while I was sleeping. So today I'm going to tell you that story. I'm going to tell you why I broke up with Google and maybe give you a little bit more kind of technical details of your personal privacy in the internet age. Now, when you talk to people about this topic, people fall broadly into three categories. The first category, and this is probably most of you, you don't have anything to hide. People say, I've got all this information, but I'm law-abiding, I don't do anything wrong, I've got nothing to hide. The second category is probably where I sit. I don't dress like that, but I'm a bit more conservative. So I run an ad blocker, I don't sign into iOS when I use an iPhone, I don't use an iPhone. I don't sign into Chrome when I'm using Google, so I try and hide my tracks a little bit more. Then the third kind is the internet survivalist. That guy is who I call the anti-scroble. That's Richard Stallman. He's the exact opposite. When he browses the internet, he uses a command line, a tool called wget. He fetches the text, he downloads it, he puts it on another machine, unplugs that machine from the internet, and then views it over there, which is really easy. I would imagine his day just flies by. I would think in the 1980s, Richard Stallman probably had a bomb shelter. He would have had loads of guns, bear traps all over the place, and been recycling his urine. But he also did something else for us. He created the envelope. And what do I mean by that? We've got to look at a little bit of the history of communication. So one of my colleagues actually came up with this when we were talking about the topic. The original letters that were posted in the original postal system, you didn't use an envelope. You would take paper, you would write what you wanted to do on it, your letter, and then you stick it in the postbox and it would go out. And the postman would take it, and they could read your letter if they wanted to. And then eventually we went, hang on a second, maybe this isn't a good idea. So people started to get envelopes, and they started to actually hide their communication. And it's really something that we've gotten to a point where when we approach technology, we put envelopes on it. So we start to actually make sure that we encrypt our communication. We're starting to look at it differently. And when you think about privacy, one of the things that I like to do is I like to think about privacy from a physical perspective. We understand the notion of someone standing at our gate with a pair of binoculars staring through your window looking into your bedroom. That's an infringement of privacy. And I experienced this particular notion recently. Last year, I had a vasectomy operation, and I had it under a local anesthetic. And as I was lying on the table, staring up at the doctors, it kind of got the notion that I'm here, most of me is covered except for the important parts, and the doctors and the nurses are all looking at me, and we were having a conversation about the growth of Facebook and the growth of the internet industry, and I thought, you have complete control over my privacy there in a physical way. So it started to get me to think about the notion of personal privacy. So we have to go back and have a look at the internet. Steve Jobs was famous for saying, it changed everything, and it did. And we started with email, but email, when it first went out, didn't have envelopes. It was clear text. We would send it or go from one server to another, and anyone along the way could have a look at what was going on. They could actually interrogate your emails. They could see what you were saying. And then we went, no, hang on, this is a bad idea because of hackers, because of identity thieves, so we started to encrypt email. And then we started to do email on our phones. And we would say, I'm over here and I'm emailing, and then we realized maybe that wasn't a good idea. Maybe we didn't want to tell people where we were. So we kind of start adding envelopes to our technologies as we go. But we know that we're putting all of this information out there, and it's going out into the hands of a few corporations. Now, all of these corporations have differing attitudes to your privacy. And they exist on what I like to call a continuum of privacy. So over here on this side, you'll have the Electronic Freedom Foundation, which, if you're South African, is the other EFF. And all the way on this side, you would have a line. This is the law. You can't cross that line. If you're doing something past here, you're doing something illegal. And over here, we have hackers, and we would have identity thieves, and the people actually who want to do harm. So along this continuum, we have, on the right-hand side, we have Apple, who are doing the right thing at the moment. They are fighting the FBI. They're taking it to the government to make sure that our privacy is kept safe. Over here is Google, who say the right things at the moment, but maybe not. And then over here is Scott McNeely from Sun Microsystems, which was then bought out by Oracle, who is on record as having said, privacy is dead, get over it. If that man ever makes a phone, don't buy it. Okay, so go back to the 1st of January, 1 month prior to my Google breakup. I did an experiment with Google. I embraced Google for a month. I changed my ways and I said, Google, you can have everything you want to know about me. I bought an Android watch, got an Android phone. I bought these shiny shoes and this jacket so I could do Internetix because apparently engineers don't know how to get dressed properly. And I just shared everything. So when Google said, can I get access to your location data? Yes. Can I geotag your photos? Of course. Just Google, think like you're talking to my mom and just say yes to everything. So for that 1 month, I just went mad. I said, Google, have at it. And I used Google Fit. And Google Fit as an application uses the accelerometer on your watch and on your phone to work out the number of steps you're doing. And it uses the GPS to work out where you've been. I used the Runkeeper app to do a few runs to work out where I was going. And it comes up in this nice little graph. And it's an okay app. It's not brilliant. It tells you where you've been. It kind of tracks your progress towards a goal. It'll encourage you if you aren't making a goal. It will cheer you if you get there. But it's okay. It's not brilliant. But every time I got up from my desk and went to the canteen to go and get some of the delicious salad, and it is delicious, it would know. It would track that and would send that information through to Google. So I wanted to just actually work out the extent of it. I set up my laptop to be a hotspot, and I routed all of my traffic from my phone through my laptop through to the internet. And that is something called Wireshark, which kind of just gives me a trace of what's going on. And you close all the apps on your phone, you kind of shut down and just lock your phone and leave it there. But every 20 seconds, it's chatting. Phone wakes up, makes a call to Google. And I know it's going to Google because we can look at the AS numbers that the IP address belongs to. And we can also have a look and see in the SSL encryption. So the exchange between my machine and the server is encrypted. At least it's encrypted. But I know that it's going through to Google. So a whole bunch of information was going out there. Now, Google don't want to kick this hornet's nest. They've had issues in the US and they've had issues in the European Union. So they give you the ability to go back and work out everything that they know about you. So I encourage you to go there. It's google.com/dashboard. And it's your history. It's your timeline. It's everything that Google's ever had a look at. As you can see, in December last year, DIY, so I was in Builders Express quite a lot. And your search history is there. Your photos are there. Your Gmail account is there. There's a bunch of information that's there. But this one got me. This one I didn't actually think about, and I didn't realize they would do. You know that OK Google service is part of Google Now? Or if you use that handy speech-to-text thing in the keyboard. So if you're driving and you need to WhatsApp someone, you don't do that because that's illegal. You talk to your phone, and your phone sends the message. Every one of those is recorded and stored. Now, I understand the machine learning algorithms need to keep this because they get better at understanding you over time. But it wasn't explicit. I didn't actually know that they were going to do that. And I find that out recently that all of this is recorded. But also all the false positives. So every time I've tried to use it and it hasn't understood me and I've sworn at it, and every time it's accidentally thought that I'm doing it, all of that is there. It just sits in the Google servers waiting around, not doing anything. But okay, I've told you that a whole bunch of my information is sitting in Google, but specifically, who is it? So, like, who actually does look after the data? Now, I like to think that it's in good hands, but I don't know these people. I don't have a personal relationship with the individuals that are looking after my information. There's a team of people, probably, that are looking after the clusters of servers where my information sits, but I have no idea who they are. And recently, Mark Zuckerberg bought the 4 houses that surround his house because he's worried about privacy. But we're in an interesting exchange, Mr. Zuckerberg, because you're asking me to share a whole bunch of stuff. So are we on the same page? And they also have policy documents. And that's the Google policy documents. Someone like Emma, I would imagine, has read it. I haven't. I meant to. You could actually just hide Mein Kampf in there and I wouldn't notice. But those documents, at least there is an agreement. At least Google have taken a stand to say, this is what we're willing to do. And if there's a problem, I have recourse. Because there's a legal document there, I have some kind of recourse for it. But the issue here is Google is only one part of the problem. Google's job is to get you to sit in front of your computer and browse and to search for things. Same as Facebook's job is to get you to sit in front of a computer and start doing something. They're a broadcaster. They're a conduit. They take your data and they hand it off into this invisible cloud of people, and they do things with your data. They're the ones who advertise to you. And I don't know who they are. I don't know what they know about me. I don't know their terms and conditions. This is a very, very sort of big and troubling world that sits far beyond the visible part of what we see. But okay, if you're still the streaker and you're happy to put your information out there, what's it worth? A single point of information about me is not useful. Knowing that Jeff Fletcher exists is not really going to make you money, because you can get my phone number probably and phone me and try and sell me something. Call centers do that. You get direct mail. We've been doing this for a while. But is it actually worth something? Eric Siegel talks about this very well in his book, Predictive Analytics. And what he's looking at is a behavioral model of you. So I take the information, all the data points that I have about you over time, and I create a view of who you are. So if you're in a call center and it costs you 20 Rand to make an outbound call, if I can know information about you and say, I use a model to predict that you're actually unlikely to want to buy the thing I'm going to sell you, I'm not going to make that call. And that makes sense. So there's money saving to be had, and that's where the behavioral modeling comes in. The other one is, if I worked for an opposition political party and I wanted a list of 180,000 names of people who were interested in a regime change, I go to change.org. They will charge you about 20 Rand a user for that list of names. And you can get it. You can go there and you can buy it to them. But the one group that does this really well and understand the benefit is financial services. So banks, and I'm going to put Discovery into this group as well because they think this way. They want to know what it is that you're doing so they can provide a propensity model. They want to understand the risk. Are you likely to default? Are you likely to churn? What are the problems that would be associated with it? But they need more information than just what you've bought. So they need to have a sense of the history of you. And in order to do that, they will give you services. They will say, here, have free internet access, or here, have an Apple Watch, because that's the way that they gather data. So they pay for it. They're paying for your data because they can use it to provide better analysis internally. But okay, so we've assumed that your data has some value. What are the things that people do with it? And they fit broadly into three categories. The first is what someone's going to do that's good. Now, this one's possibly arguable. Targeted advertising helps minimize retail friction. Sometimes online, it's actually quite difficult to find the thing you want. There's a lot of options, and everyone's vying for your attention, so it becomes quite difficult. Amazon are absolute masters at this. And Amazon also know that I love modular synthesizers, and they also seem to think that I need vitamins. So they've kind of got a sense of who I am. And in the same way that it's a win-win for me if I don't get a phone call from the call center. So minimizing your friction in terms of retail becomes a benefit by the fact that your data is out there. And health data. Apple have been doing this. They've been taking, and IBM Watson, and I assume Discovery will be in this group as well. They're looking at your health data and they're augmenting. They're using machine learning to try and understand more and provide better health services, but also predict something. So if there's a risk that something's going to go wrong, they have your data and they'll be able to help you. But this one's one of my personal favorites because I like to code, and this is fun code for me. Microsoft's Project AI will take all of the information that the Bing search engine has indexed. So all of the video, all of the images, all of the text, everything that's in the public domain. And you can take a picture and you can say, okay, Project AI, is the person inside here smiling? And it will tell you. And you can look at video and you can try and understand what's inside the video. But it also does word prediction. So you can give it a series of words and say, what is the most likely next word that's going to come on? And it will predict that for you. And I took the word huge, and I handed it to the API, and what came back made me weep for humanity. Okay, so the bad. What are people going to do with your data that's considered bad? The Ashley Madison hack. Now, I don't know who remembers this. It was fairly recent, but Ashley Madison is a site that specialized in helping people commit infidelity. And you would pay to try and meet like-minded people. Turned out that when it got hacked, the statistics were there was 90% men and 50% robot women. And they had a service where if you'd used them, you could have your data deleted. So you could pay them and they would delete your data. But they didn't. And when they got hacked, the information from the people who'd paid to have it deleted went out into the public domain. So it's problematic from a business perspective because you're assuming some sort of trust for a site that works in infidelity, sure, but some sort of trust that they're actually going to do the right thing. And we also have learned from Edward Snowden that governments will snoop on its people, but the Chinese government at the moment have created this service called the social credit rating, social credit score. And they'll look at your online activity, and they'll look at what you're buying and what you're saying on social media, and how closely it aligns to the party's ideology. And the further are you away from that, the lower your credit score. But it impacts your ability to get a loan, and it impacts your ability to get a job. So it becomes problematic. Your privacy is gone if you're operating in that space. But then we get to corporations, and I know we said no Uber, but I'm on the bad side of Uber. A few years ago, Uber released a blog report called Rides of Glory. And what they did was they looked at the data of the people who were using Uber, and they said, if this user who normally drives around this area, and this user who normally drives around this area, if both of them go to the same hotel at the same time, they're probably having an affair. Now, I assume they were working with Ashley Madison at the time, but the specific issue I have with this is that they did it, and that they felt it was okay to publish a blog post about it and brag about this. They took data, they did a whole bunch of things with it and said, look how clever we are, look at how we've infringed your privacy. And corporations can often behave badly. If you take what Enron did with trying to let old people in California die from the cold, or WorldCom. I was actually working at WorldCom at the time when their earnings scandal came about, and basically a whole bunch of shareholders lied in their securities exchange filing. But to deal with the problem, their solution was to make us write an ethics test. It was an online test, so we could hack it, but they made us write an ethics test. So not all corporations, big corporations, can be trusted, with the exception of Internet Solutions and the Greater Dimension Data Group, for whom I work and would like to continue working well after Internetix. Okay, so now we get to the creepy. Now we get to things that people are doing that just gets a little bit weird. Specifically, creepiness changes over time. So when we first had caller ID, people didn't like it. They thought it was strange, they didn't want it, they thought it was a creepy thing to do. And CCTV, always being recorded, people thought, this is not a good thing, this gets a bit creepy. I'd like to introduce you to Hello Barbie, also known as the Bride of Chucky. Hello Barbie is the new toy from Mattel, has electronics inside it and connects to the Wi-Fi network of your house, and runs some kind of Android, I assume, and can talk and listen to your children. So you can have a direct link between the marketing department of Mattel and your child's innermost thoughts. And it can ask innocent questions like, where do you live, your likes, your dislikes, your social status, your parents' disposable income, the sort of things that Mattel would want to know about you. So we need to really go back to focus groups and stop scaring our children. And this one is a new one that has not yet been abused, but you just know it's going to be abused. This is facial expression remapping. So I can take the video of, let's say, a famous actor telling me about the virtues of a particular product, and a video of my wife or one of my kids, and I can map that across. So suddenly in my timeline, I can have a video of one of my kids or my wife popping up saying, Dad, your car's old, you need to buy a new one. And we're at that point, but can you imagine how creepy this gets if you do this with someone who's recently passed away? This technology is actually quite open for abuse. But technology is going to change. And Robert's Scrobel showed us exactly how much. We're kind of living in a weird sci-fi future at the moment. So what should you do? The first thing is you need to be informed, right? Don't just assume that nothing's happening. Don't just assume that everything's okay. When you're having a trade exchange with someone who's trying to say, here's access to the internet in exchange for your search history, you need to know about that trade exchange and you need to know what information you're giving to them. And there's 4 things that I like to think about. The first is, will they tell you everything that they know about you? Do they have that capability? Can they look across all their systems and say, we know all of this about you? Secondly, if you ask them to delete it, will they delete it? Have they got the capacity? Do they have the capability? Do they know about all the systems so that they can actually delete it? Are they enriching it? So are they taking models about you, and are they starting to make extra information over and above what they already have? And will they sell your data? Does it go off to someone else? So in that, when you start to ask those questions, when you're actually about to enter into that trade exchange, if you don't have the time to find out about that person, don't do it. It's probably a bad idea. I've been reading about some of these things, like there's games that you can download on your phone, free games involving sweets and a game that you play things with. It's basically the data privacy equivalent of a home invasion. They go into your phone and they say, contact, thanks very much. SMSs, yep, I'll take that. All your photos, thank you. I'm going to give it to these people. You don't know who it is. It's just going off out there. So you have to actually start to be informed about what's going on. And it comes down to the point that my primary school teacher was right. Don't take candy from strangers. So I've recently switched to DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo is an alternate search engine. It's difficult to use because they don't do what Google does, and which is one of the things I started to realize. Google take what they know about you and what you've searched before to make certain search results preferential. And it becomes weird when you use a different search engine that doesn't box you, that doesn't actually think about you. And when DuckDuckGo fails, I switch back to Google, but I don't give Google a cookie. I don't let Google know who I am. And so Google, it's almost like Google doesn't know me anymore. Maybe that's why we broke up. But you need to rethink these relationships. You need to rethink your relationship with Google and your relationship with Facebook and Discovery and your bank and all of these people. And we have to go back to the notion of physical privacy. So when you're dealing with the point where you're about to upload some information, think about people in this context. Think about, say, your doctor and your bank manager and the guy standing outside your house with a crowbar and lots of face tattoos. Would you share a photo of the new TV you've bought with any of those people? Would you share a photo of the car that you just bought that you can hardly afford the payments on? Or, say, a picture of you at the office party where you've had a bit too much to drink? In each of those, you'd think about it that this is a need-to-know basis. This is how you would moderate that relationship a bit better. If you think of Google as a call center, so as an example, let's say I phone Google and I go, hi, Google, yes, I'd like to see pictures of the woman who played Starbuck in the remake of BSG. Yes, I know it's the second time this week. What phone am I using? It's a Samsung S6. Why? What browser am I using? Chrome. Where do I live? Why do you want to know that? So that's a weird set of questions for someone in that scenario. But when you use your phone, it does that. That information goes. You don't even see it. It just goes out there without any input from you. So as the world changes and as we get more and more technology and things get a little bit different, you can be an internet survivalist, but it's hard. Not using Google and not using Facebook is actually quite difficult to do. But similarly, if you're going to be the streaker and just give everything out there, you have to remember 2 things, 2 very important things. The first is that there's going to be people you don't know who are rummaging through your stuff. They're having a look at all of your information, and they're probably looking at bits of your information you don't want them to. But second, and this is the important one, people will manipulate you into buying something. That's what they're using your data for. And if you don't believe that you can be manipulated into buying something, you need to go and read the article about how De Beers created the market for diamond engagement rings. It didn't exist. The notion of diamonds are forever, diamonds are a girl's best friend, that you should spend 2 months' salary on a diamond engagement ring, They made that up. It was the marketing department at De Beers. And you imagine now, if I were to go to my wife and say, I love you a lot, here's a bit of metal with some hard carbon in it. It's special carbon because you can see through it. It loses a little bit of its luster, but that's what they created. They created an entire market out of this. And you're giving your information to marketing departments that are going to use their skill into manipulating you into buying things. So, as internet solutions, we have to think about your data very carefully. We have to think about your data like it's your money. We need to make sure that we treat it with the safety and security that it deserves and that it's sacrosanct. But equally, if you're the CIO or the chief data officer of a corporation and someone comes up to you and says, hey, I have this great idea. We can take this information about our users and do this with it, and we can sell all of this extra stuff. Is that okay? Is that in a scenario where you have an agreement from your customers that you can do that? Are they okay with what you're doing with their data? You can't just assume that having access to data gives you free rights to do anything. But ultimately, we're talking about the trade exchanges. You need to be aware of the trade exchanges that you're making. You're giving out data, you're getting a service in return. You need to know where your data is going, you need to know who has it, and as long as you keep that in mind, you should be okay. Thank you.